I'll call the hearing to order. The committee meets this morning to consider the nominations of Mr. Robert Storch to be the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, Dr. Lester Martinez-Lopez to be Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs, Mr. Christopher Lohman to be the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment, and Mr. Peter Bouchard to be General Counsel of the Department of the Air Force. On behalf of the committee, I want to thank each of you for your willingness to return to public service. I would also like to welcome the guests and family members who are with us today. Mr. Storch, I welcome your wife Sarah and daughter Hannah. Dr. Martinez, I welcome your son Lucas. Mr. Lohman, I welcome your wife Tracy, daughter Shane, and son Ian. And Mr. Bouchard, I welcome your wife Sarah, son Henry, and daughter Sophie. I know each of these nominees have family members who are probably watching from home, and I thank them for the support of your service as well. Mr. Storch, you are well qualified to be Inspector General of the Defense Department. In addition to your current role as the IG for the National Security Agency, you served as Deputy IG of the Department of Justice from 2012 to 2018. There are a number of important duties that will require your attention within the department. It will be your responsibility to conduct and supervise audits and investigations relating to the department, provide efficiency and effectiveness in the administration of the Defense Department, and lead the combating of fraud, waste, and abuse. You will also assist the Secretary of Defense in addressing extremism in the military. While we continue to believe that the number of extremists in the ranks remains very, very small and does not represent a systemic issue, even one is too many. The DoD IG has an important role to play in assessing the extent of this challenge. During your testimony, I would ask for your views on the issue and your objectives for this position. Dr. Martinez, you are nominated to be the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs, or the ASDHA. I would note your extensive record of service in military health care, both in and out of uniform, as having prepared you well for this position. The ASDHA is the principal advisor of the Secretary of Defense and the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness for all of the department's force, health protection policies, programs, and activities. The ASDHA is also responsible for execution of the department's medical mission, including the readiness of medical services during military operations, and for ensuring the health of the members of the military services, their families, and other eligible beneficiaries. In addition, you will govern the management of Defense Department health and medical programs, the sponsorship and oversight of medical research and development, and medical education and training. If confirmed, you will need to address a number of pressing challenges for the department, including the implementation of COVID-19 vaccination across the force, improving the staffing of Walter Reed, and providing medical support to the combatant commanders. I hope you'll address these challenges in your testimony. Mr. Lohman, you are nominated to be the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment. You bring more than 30 years of service as a Marine and Army civil servant to this position, experience that will be invaluable given the complex scope of responsibilities before you. One of the most pressing issues of the Defense Department is reducing its contested logistics vulnerabilities. The tyranny of distance challenge is often referenced in potential Pacific conflict scenarios, and we saw it proven true during our combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Although there have been several studies and tabletop exercises on this topic, the GAO found the Defense Department has still failed to implement more than 50 recommendations from a recent review. I would like to know your perspective on how the department can better navigate a contested logistics environment. Additionally, maintaining the operational readiness of the force has always been expensive. Given the rising cost of new platforms like the F-35, coupled with supply chain impacts from the pandemic, I hope you will share your plans for tackling these challenges. Finally, Mr. Bouchard, you are nominated to be General Counsel of the Department of the Air Force. This position has a broad scope of responsibilities, including serving as legal advisor to the Secretary of the Air Force and other officers within the department, as well as to the chiefs of the Air Force and Space Force and their staffs. If confirmed, you will be tasked with providing legal services throughout the entire department in a variety of disciplines, including fiscal law, ethics, dispute resolution, environmental law, labor law, and litigation. In addition, the General Counsel exercises oversight of intelligence and other sensitive activities and investigations. These are wide-ranging and complex challenges that will require astute legal guidance. I would ask that you share how you plan to approach these issues and what objectives you have for this important position. Thank you again to our nominees. I look forward to your testimonies. Now, let me recognize the ranking member, Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks to our witnesses for being with us and for their willingness to serve additionally. We've got quite a few challenges facing us, including in your areas of responsibility. And while the world is watching, Beijing hosts the Olympics and whitewash and ongoing genocide, China has also accelerated its economic and military aggression. The Russians are using their military might to try to redraw the borders of a sovereign country, and they're using energy as a weapon to try to split NATO, and Putin's ambitions won't stop in Ukraine. And we learned this firsthand when we spent some time in Romania just a few weeks ago. And they were it's very clear, yeah, maybe Ukraine, but Romania's next. And so this is not something that just is some speculation. Last week, we heard from General Kurilla that Iran is the #1 destabilizing threat in the Middle East, and about the risks of Iran using sanctions relief to support proxies that attack U.S. forces in the region. North Korea fired more missiles in the recent months than ever before, and apparently they're only pausing now because of the Olympics that are taking place, and they don't want to make China angry. The 2018 defense strategy is still good today, and it provides a roadmap to tackle these challenges. But we need to stay focused, and we'll need your help to do so in the positions that you will be assuming if you are confirmed, and you will be confirmed. At the same time, historic inflation is hitting every part of the Pentagon, from service member benefits to maintenance. It will make your jobs much, much more difficult. Lastly, on Afghanistan, I'm sure you all read the Washington Post reporting about the military's own investigation of the withdrawal. It seems like this review can teach us some really valuable lessons. We are the Committee of Jurisdiction over the Department of Defense. My colleagues and I have been asking for weeks to see the reviews that they've made. It is unacceptable for us to be finding out about these documents in the Washington Post before they are shared with us. I can't really say that in as strong terms as I'd like to. The last NDAA established a bipartisan commission to investigate what happened in Afghanistan, and I supported that. But this committee also has the duty to conduct its own oversight. I think we'll need to hear from some of the folks involved with this after-action report very soon in open and closed sessions. So we need strong civilian leadership at DoD who will work with Congress. So I look forward to hearing from all of you this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Inhofe. And now let me call on Mr. Storch for your testimony, please.
My apology. No problem. Thank you. Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today with regard to my nomination to be the Inspector General at the Department of Defense. The work of OIGs necessarily reflects that of the departments and agencies we oversee. The DoD, of course, has the critical mission of securing our national defense, a core function of government. And given the tremendous size and scope of the defense enterprise, the department, in one way or another, does essentially everything that government does. This requires its OIG to have all the tools in the oversight tool belt functioning well to effectively oversee these critical and diverse efforts. I am truly humbled to have been nominated to lead the team at the DoD OIG and believe that I am well positioned to do so. I currently am in my 5th year serving as the presidentially appointed Senate-confirmed Inspector General at the National Security Agency within the Department of Defense, and so am familiar with both the duties and functions generally applicable to a PASIG and with carrying out those responsibilities at an agency within the DoD where there is important integration between civilian and uniformed personnel and under the rules and policies applicable across the department. I am very proud of the efforts that my team and I have made to enhance the independence and the impact of our oversight work at NSA OIG, where I have emphasized getting to the root causes of the issues we uncover and holding agency leadership accountable for addressing them. I am also proud of the strides we have made to enhance the transparency of our work, including the launch of our independent public website, where we now regularly post unclassified versions of our semi-annual reports to Congress and unclassified versions or summaries of a number of our underlying reports. I also have emphasized the importance of engagement with the Congress, which helps us to understand its concerns and to provide oversight that may be helpful to inform its constitutional, legislative, and oversight functions. As the NSA IG, and before that as the Deputy IG and Whistleblower Ombudsperson, working with and for IG Michael Horowitz at the Department of Justice, I have worked to advance whistleblower rights and protections, which is something that I believe is fundamentally important for the operation of OIGs and indeed for good government. Employees and others perform an important service when they bring forward evidence of what they reasonably believe to be wrongdoing, and they never should suffer reprisal for doing so. Of course, none of this work is possible without people. As the NSA IG, and before that as the Deputy IG at DOJ, I've been actively engaged in promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and ensuring that we provide a positive working environment for our team. I'm very proud of the efforts we've made in this regard at NSA OIG, and if confirmed as the DoD IG, I will bring all of these areas of emphasis and approaches to leading that very important office. Prior to joining the OIG community, I spent some 24 years as a federal prosecutor at 2 U.S. attorneys' offices and between them at the Public Integrity Section of the Criminal Division here in Washington. I believe that being an IG and a prosecutor are similar in important respects. Both fundamentally call for doing what is right, and both call for the analysis of complex fact patterns and the exercise of independent judgment to reach that result. Also, as a former federal prosecutor and now as an IG, I understand the importance of ensuring that my office's work not be influenced or even perceived as being influenced in any way by partisanship. I am honored to have been nominated to be an IG by presidents of both political parties, and if confirmed, I shall continue to be true to the principle of nonpartisanship that is a hallmark of the IG system. I've been actively involved in working across the IG community over the past decade, founding and leading the SIGI Whistleblower Ombuds Working Group when I was at DOJ OIG, and serving for several years now as Vice Chair of the SIGI Tech Committee and as Chair of its Emerging Technology Subcommittee. As for the latter, I think it is essential that we as IGs be prepared to conduct meaningful, impactful oversight over the increasing use of new technologies within the government, and that we be able to use them ourselves appropriately in our work. I also was honored to be named in 2020 to serve as one of 4 IGs on the SIGI Integrity Committee, and recently to be named Vice Chair of the committee, which has the important role of considering allegations of misconduct made against IGs and their senior staffs. If I'm confirmed, I believe that all these experiences will serve me well in leading the diverse operations of the defense oversight community and coordinating with other IGs as appropriate. I'll end with what's most important to me and recognize and thank my brilliant and wonderful wife, who somehow will have put up with me for 30 years of marriage this May, and my 2 spectacular daughters. As I always say, they are the center of the universe. I'd also like to thank my family and friends who are watching online for their support. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Dr. Martinez-Lopez, please.
Good morning, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Enoff, distinguished committee members. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. I am extremely honored and humbled to be here as President Biden's nominee for Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs. And I am thankful for the trust placed in me by President Biden, Secretary Austin, and Undersecretary Cisneros. I was raised in Maricao, a small town in the mountains of Puerto Rico. Not in my wildest dream would I have thought I would be here in front of you today. During medical school, I was blessed to receive the Health Professional Scholarship. The financial support allowed me to dedicate myself to my studies and to excel. I was driven by an interest in saving lives through medicine and serving the United States. Upon graduation, I joined the active duty Army at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I completed my family practice residency. My plan was to fulfill my service obligation and return to Puerto Rico. But after volunteering for the first multinational force and observers deployment in the Sinai, I got hooked. I loved serving with the Army in the field. My service led me to command soldiers for 12 years, at home and abroad, serve with field units for 7 years, become the chief medical officers of the United Nations mission in Haiti, and serve as a senior medical officer during our Hurricane Mitch response in Central America. My final assignment led me to command the United States Army Medical Research and Developmental Command in Fort Detrick, Maryland, where we worked on all aspects of medical research. Working with soldiers willing to risk their health and lives for our country inspired me to continue serving alongside them and to deliver them the best medical care possible. Those same factors would motivate me to care for our active duty service members, retirees, and their families if I'm lucky enough to be confirmed. After retiring from the Army, I was fortunate to lead a successful and fulfilling civilian life. I was administrator of the Lyndon B. Johnson Hospital, part of an integrated governmental system that provides critical healthcare services to the residents of Harris County, Texas. Thereafter, I became the first chief medical officer of an over 400-bed acute care hospital in Brandon, Florida. I learned a lot about patient safety, quality of care, and efficient health care management. One of my favorite experiences was being a member of the Army Science Board, where I participated in a multitude of studies. Through these experiences, I quickly learned that you don't need to wear a military uniform to serve the country and our communities. If confirmed, I believe that my previous military and civilian experiences will serve me well as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs. I will be honored to have the opportunity to continue to serve our service members, their families, and our retirees. I will strive for the highest level of force medical readiness and the readiness of the medical force. The future may bring difficult missions abroad and at home. To face these challenges, it is vital that we have a medically ready force. There must be a focus on prevention of injuries. However, if injured, we owe our service members the best medical response we can muster as a nation. We must continue to improve our care, develop solutions for new and old challenges, and work closely with our interagency friends and commercial partners to accomplish our mission. Our service members deserve no less. I understand the military healthcare system is very large and complex, but if confirmed, I'll do my best to improve the quality of the care, the quality of the service, and the value proposition to all those served by the military health system. I will work hard to complete the military health system reform in a way that will strengthen the medical readiness of the armed forces and the readiness of the medical personnel by improving healthcare benefits and services to millions of beneficiaries composed of service members, military retirees, and family members. If confirmed, I commit to do my best for those serving our nation, and I also commit to work with this committee and Congress in a transparent and responsive way to meet the healthcare needs of our service members and their families and our retirees. Senators, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Loman, please.
Good morning, Chairman Reed.
Your microphone, please.
Good morning, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and committee members. I am deeply honored to come before you today as President Biden's nominee for Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment. I would like to thank the President for nominating me and Secretary Austin and Deputy Secretary Hicks for their confidence in me. If confirmed, I am excited for the opportunity to continue serving our nation in this critical role during these extraordinary times. I want to start off by acknowledging my wife, Tracy, who is here with me today and has been by my side for the last 25 years. Tracy is the bedrock of our family, whose support has made my career and service to this nation possible. Our greatest joy are our 4 children, 2 of which are here today with me. Shane, a graduate of Virginia Commonwealth University, and Ian, a high school senior. Our other 2 children, Ryan and Addison, are currently students at the University of Virginia and are watching virtually. In fact, my daughter Addison is currently enrolled as a Navy intern with a focus on computer science, and so she will continue the tradition of service. I am also grateful to my immediate and extended family for their sustained and honorable service to this country. We are a multi-generational, multi-service family representing every service and the Coast Guard going back over 80 years. My family's legacy of service has been a guiding force during my 36-year career, which began in 1984 on the well-known yellow footprints at Parris Island. I started my post-Marine Corps life with the Army as a young GS-5. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that I would one day be a nominee for the Assistant Secretary of Defense. I've served alongside both women and men, soldiers and civilians who dedicated their lives helping to sustain the readiness of our forces. I could not be more proud to call them colleagues and friends, and if confirmed, I will continue to serve at their side. The purpose of the Department of Defense is to provide military forces needed to deter war and ensure our nation's security. To accomplish this mission, we must posture our sustainment capabilities to enable the readiness and meet the nation's requirements when needed. Sustainment is most effective when integrated with the joint force and in coordination with our allies and industry partners. I appreciate the importance of sustainment, and throughout my career, I have learned that resilient sustainment is critical to enhancing our military effectiveness. The role of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment is to ensure the resources needed to execute the Department's mission are readily available, while maximizing execution and affordability. The Assistant Secretary must ensure the services have the policies and processes necessary to succeed, and the Department has the proper oversight to ensure our strategic readiness posture is sufficient. The ultimate goal is to provide our service members with the most modern, capable, and sustainable military equipment and supplies necessary to deter or defeat our adversaries. Secretary Austin has laid out clear priorities in his March 2021 message to the force: defend the nation, take care of our people, and succeed through teamwork. To that end, and if confirmed, my priorities will be to ensure our supply chain is resilient and defended, our civilian workforce is trained and equipped with the necessary analytical skills and tools needed to sustain a military in a complex, multi-domain environment, that our organic industrial base is modernized and fortified to meet the challenges of sustaining technologies required on a modern battlefield. And finally, that our modernization programs account for life cycle and sustainment costs early in the acquisition process. I will work towards sustainment strategies that balance readiness requirements with cost in order to produce the maximum amount of combat power. There are numerous challenges in each of these areas, but with the help of the members of this committee and Congress, we will make the necessary improvements to ensure sustained readiness far into the future. If confirmed, I pledge to work with Congress, the services, industry, our partners and allies, and other stakeholders to enhance and sustain military readiness. The heavy responsibility and demands of this position are evident. Given the critical nature of the role and the importance of the mission, I will dedicate myself fully to this task. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher, please.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, distinguished members of the committee, I consider it the honor of my life to be nominated by President Biden to serve as the General Counsel of the Department of the Air Force and have the opportunity to appear before this committee. A moment like this is really about all those who have supported you. And at the top of that list is my dear family. Mr. Chairman, thank you for recognizing my wife, Sarah, who has been at my side, my blessed side, for 31 years, and our children, Isabel, Henry, and Sophie. I'd like to offer my comments this morning in the context of the three priorities set by Secretary Austin for the Department of Defense. First, defend the nation. Non-kinetic attacks pose a significant threat to our national security. As the Air Force develops its next-generation air dominance program, modernizes its nuclear enterprise, and builds out its Space Force, cybersecurity and technological innovation will be critical priorities. Over the past decade, I've developed domain expertise in cybersecurity with a particular focus on public-private partnerships to protect our critical infrastructure. I've had the privilege of testifying before many of you in prior appearances before the Senate Homeland Security, Banking, and Commerce Committees about ways in which government and industry must come together to protect our critical infrastructure. Second, take care of our people. The brave men and women of our armed forces represent the best of America. To honor their commitment and sacrifice, society has a solemn duty to protect them, as well as their families and our veterans. As recent reports have shown, there's important work that needs to be done to fully meet this responsibility. Early in my career, I had the great privilege of serving as the Special Assistant to former Secretary of State Cyrus Vance in the peace negotiations in the Balkans. It was my first exposure to war, and it sparked a profound respect for our military and a deep interest in our national security. As chair of the Veterans Committee at John Jay College for Criminal Justice and executive sponsor of our Veterans Program at Marsh McLennan, I spearheaded a series of initiatives under the banner, "We've Got Your Six," to help veterans with jobs and enhanced benefits. If confirmed, one of my top priorities would be to support Secretary Kendall and the rest of the department's leadership in implementing the sexual assault reforms recently approved by Congress and fostering a culture of integrity and inclusion. Third, succeed through teamwork. In this era of strategic competition, the security challenges before our country require intense collaboration across the executive branch, with Congress, with industry, and with our allies. For the past 17 years, I've served as the General Counsel of Marsh McLennan, a global professional services firm. With the support of my colleagues, I've built a world-class and diverse legal and compliance team. And I've developed the project management skills to drive policy change across an organization of more than 80,000 employees in 100 countries. If confirmed, I look forward to partnering with the civilian and military lawyers within the Department of the Air Force to provide sound and pragmatic advice in support of the mission articulated by Secretary Kendall. One team, one fight. I want to express my appreciation to all the members of the committee for your consideration. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, I have a series of questions that are directed at all nominees. You may answer in unison. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
Yes.
Have you assumed any duties or taken any actions that would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No.
No.
Exercising our legislative and oversight responsibilities makes it important that the committee, its subcommittees, and other appropriate committees of Congress receive testimony, briefings, reports, records, and other information from the executive branch on a timely basis. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify before this committee when requested?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you agree to provide records, documents, and electronic communications in a timely manner when requested by this committee, its subcommittees, or other appropriate committees of Congress, and to consult with the requester regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such records?
Yes.
Yes.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established by this committee for the production of reports, records, and other information, including timely responding to hearing questions for the record?
Yes.
Yes.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
Yes.
Will those witnesses and briefers be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And just the information of my colleagues, we anticipate a vote at noon. At that vote, we will hopefully have a committee hearing off the floor to move military nominations alone. We'd like to get this done, otherwise we will lose some valuable time getting military personnel confirmed, including General Kurilla, who has been appointed as the new CENTCOM commander. Now, Mr. Storch, the IG plays so many critical roles, but one critical role is in maintaining the ethical sensitivity and priorities of the men and women of the armed forces. I think it springs from at least three sources, probably more: the constitutional oath one takes, the personal integrity one expects of a member of the military services, and also the ethic of protecting, not exploiting your subordinates. How can the IG help raise the ethical standards and insist on ethical qualifications?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Reed. You know, IGs, I believe, play an important role in that area in a number of different ways. One of which is by doing audits, evaluations, and other oversight work that examines different issues across the department and ensures that the department is carrying out its responsibilities appropriately and in compliance with all requirements. On the other side, of course, we have investigations division, and where people don't meet those standards, it needs to be understood that IGs will appropriately investigate administrative misconduct, making findings where appropriate, and also referring matters for civil or criminal investigation if that's appropriate. Additionally, beyond all those sort of functions, I think IGs play a critical role in the communication of ethical standards. I mentioned whistleblowers in my opening statements. I think that's critically important that it be understood throughout an agency, up to the very top, that we encourage people, and people are encouraged, to come forward if they see something that's wrong so that someone can look into it and, if appropriate, take corrective action. And so that message needs to be disseminated across the department, really starting at the very top. Additionally, IGs participate routinely in trainings and other programs that help to make clear to the workforce the standards that are expected. So I think there are myriad ways in which that can be done, and if confirmed, I look forward to working on it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bouchard, am I pronouncing that correctly, by the way?
More or less, Mr. Chairman. Bashar.
Bashar. Well, in Rhode Island, it's Bouchard, but Bashar for the moment. Thank you. I apologize.
Anything works.
I apologize. In a similar vein, the General Counsel of the Air Force will have a significant role in maintaining the ethical standards of the Air Force, and again, springing from the constitutional oath that we all take, the integrity of the individuals we expect, and also for particularly military personnel, placing oneself behind responsibilities to subordinates. Can you comment on your approach?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I really think of the role in two ways. One is to serve as the principal legal advisor, as you indicated, to the Secretary and the leadership. Secretary Kendall has articulated 7 operational imperatives, and I would want to consult with the Secretary about how the Office of General Counsel could best support him. And the second is really as the Chief Ethics Officer, and trying to inculcate an environment of integrity and inclusion, not simply to comply with the law, but also to engender trust with other stakeholders.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lohman, congested logistics is a critical aspect. And Napoleon said an army moves on its stomach. And, well, we're moving in the air, on sea, on land, but we've got to move. Can you briefly comment on your approach to dealing with this issue?
Senator, thank you. So, as you rightly point out, Senator, global operations require secure access to supply chains. It requires secure access to both inter and intra-theater lift, whether that's surface lift or airlift capabilities. And so operations, for example, in the Indo-Pacific would require the necessary posture and positioning of our supplies. It requires the necessary end-to-end supply chain oversight and visibility such that we understand where the supplies are in fact positioned and that they are positioned at echelon ready for use in support of any operation regardless of where that is globally. So if confirmed, Senator, I would certainly work with my staff on ASDS as well as the COCOMs and the services to ensure that end-to-end visibility is available and that we are reviewing the strategic positioning of supplies.
Thank you very much. Dr. Martinez-Lopez, my time is short, but could I ask you what you consider, and very briefly, the greatest threat to the long-term viability of the military healthcare system?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. I think readiness is the most important aspect to the military health system. So the challenge is what's happening today in order to us to sustain the readiness. Resources, how many resources have we available? And the last question, and the tricky question is, what are the threats? Threats keep changing, especially in the medical field. We never dreamed of having a COVID maybe 10 years ago, and now we're dealing with it. So what will be the next threat, and how well we're going to be equipped and resourced to deal with that threat? So we have to be nimble, and we have to be ready to. I think that will be the biggest challenge the department will face.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Senator Inhofe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bashar, the last NDAA that we just enacted some of the most sweeping changes to the Uniform Code of Military Justice since it's been created. To allow the military services to implement these reforms, we put into place a 2-year implementation period. And with your background, people have heard me talk about this, but why is it so important for the Air Force to have time to implement these changes?
Senator Inhofe, sexual assault in any context is reprehensible. Sexual assault in the context of the military is particularly destructive because of its impact on unit cohesion and force readiness. The changes that the Congress have approved, taking specific crimes out of the chain of command, as well as the IRC recommendations that have been embraced by the Department of Defense, are substantial undertakings and are going to require really sustained commitment from military commanders across the field, as well as the other senior leaders within the organization. And so the goal is to get it right, naturally. And if confirmed, that's what I would try to do.
And to get it right, it does take time sometimes. Mr. Storch, I've heard some people recently calling for the use of artificial intelligence to monitor service members' communications in order to root out potential extremists before they. To me, this is one of the most outrageous things that I've ever heard. And I'd just ask you, in your view, what are the risks to service members' civil liberties from using artificial intelligence to monitor their activities? And how would you ensure that service members' civil liberties are protected?
Ranking Member Inhofe, as indicated in my initial statement, artificial intelligence and emerging technologies is an issue in which I've taken particular interest in the IG community, and I lead the IG community's subcommittee in that area, where we're looking at ways to do oversight over its use. Additionally, at NSA OIG, we've been looking at that, and we currently have a joint review that's pending, actually with the Department of Defense IG, looking at the integration of artificial intelligence into the NSA SIGINT activities to ensure that that's being done in compliance with DoD and IC guidelines. So those are issues with which I'm generally familiar, and if confirmed, I would work with the team at the DoD IG to examine the issue you've identified and welcome the opportunity to engage with you and your staff on any concerns.
Sure, and I know that's why I asked you the question, because you have that familiarity and that background.
Yes, sir.
Now, Mr. Storch, there have been thousands of requests from the service members for religious accommodations to the department's COVID vaccine mandate, and there have only been 12 accommodations granted thus far. That's 3 for Marines, and I think the 9 of them for airmen. And each of those service members is already planning to leave. So does it seem reasonable to you that services would grant only 12 religious accommodations when they have received over some 10,000 requests? And I'm not going to ask you, there wouldn't be time to answer anyway how you want to correct this situation, but will you commit to reviewing this issue and so we can have something in place to correct the problem?
So the OIG obviously has jurisdiction over all programs and operations of the department. I know that the office has been engaged in looking at different aspects of the COVID response and has a pending audit related to the vaccine distribution plan. It's a rapidly changing situation. If I'm confirmed, I certainly will commit to meeting with the team at the OIG and discussing the situation as it then exists. And if it's appropriate to do a review, then looking forward to pursuing that. That's something I discussed with the team and would welcome the opportunity to discuss with you as well, sir.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Senator Shaheen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to each of the nominees, and thank you to you and your families for being willing to come back into public service and take on these important positions. Dr. Martinez-Lopez, I want to begin with you because in December, with over 20 of my colleagues, we sent a bipartisan letter to the Department of Defense expressing our concern over the July 2021 DoD Inspector General report on PFAS blood testing for firefighters. I'm going to ask you about this as well, Mr. Storch. But I was pleased the department moved quickly to provide a briefing, but I'm very concerned that there still requires oversight of all PFAS matters and that's going to require continuing attention. So I would ask you, Doctor, you talked about the focus on prevention of injuries, but if confirmed, will you commit to really doing something with this data so we can assess what it says about the potential health impacts of PFAS and those who are exposed to it?
Senator, PFAS and the threat it presents is, all those chemicals have been with us for many, many years, 40 or more. And now we're learning that some may be dangerous to us. So yes, if confirmed, I commit to look into this issue, look at ways to, if we could get working with the services to get rid of those that we can get rid of. And if not, figure out a way to mitigate the exposure. And again, working with the service, given the medical, environmental health experience that we bring, and hopefully we'll come out with a solution set that will, prevent service members and family members from getting exposed to these chemicals, if not, ways to mitigate, and if needed, treat it for the conditions.
Well, thank you. One of the things that the department is doing right now is fulfilling its requirement to provide PFAS blood testing for firefighters, but it doesn't encompass the broader military family. So do you believe that blood testing for service members and military families stationed at installations with known PFAS exposure should be offered blood testing?
Senator, again, this is a concerning issue to all of us. We need to come out with an action plan. If confirmed, I'll work with the Health Affairs team trying to figure out an answer to your question. Right now, I'm not prepared to answer one way or the other because I don't know, but I hope that if confirmed, I'll be able to come back to you and give you a clinical answer that is relevant to those exposed to these chemicals.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, and I'm sure that this committee will be interested in working with you on that. Mr. Storch, I talked about the DoD IG report back in July on PFAS exposure. The report revealed that sufficient protective measures have not been taken to reduce exposure to PFAS substances, and that PFAS blood testing programs for firefighters were underutilized to track exposure. So, can you talk about how you would see your role in monitoring progress related to PFAS testing and remediation?
Absolutely, Senator. I am familiar with the report you're talking about, obviously, and it's part of all OIG's work, not just to issue reports, but then to follow up as appropriate, right? So we track the recommendations across the IG community. I'm not obviously familiar with the particular status of those, but if I am confirmed, I certainly would look into that. And it's the IG's job to make sure that the agency is taking timely and appropriate action to meet the intent of our recommendations. So I would work with the team at the OIG to make sure that's being done. And additionally, as we do that, we often find areas for additional review that are warranted. And we'd continue to be open to that as well, and if appropriate, do such a review. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I know this committee looks forward to working with you on that and to doing what we can to be responsive. Mr. Lohman, again, if confirmed, you'll be responsible for overseeing energy and environmental policies within the department. Identifying the source of PFAS in the environment is crucial to protecting safe drinking water in our communities, particularly at DoD installations. So can you talk about how you'll work with the EPA to develop and employ new methods to address PFAS?
Senator, thank you. So first, let me just say that the safety of our service members, families, and local communities is of paramount importance. I understand that the Deputy Secretary of Defense just signed out a memorandum establishing an Assistant Secretary of Defense for Energy, Environment, and Installations. And so if confirmed, I will work very closely with the new ASD EI&E to make sure that there is a deliberate and efficient transfer of the personnel and resources and policies from ASDS to the ASD IE&E to enable success and continue the momentum in this area.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I'm out of time, but Mr. Bashar, I would just point out that the Air Force was very responsive when PFAS showed up in the water at the former Pease Air Force Base in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And I would hope that you and your role will continue to support those efforts and encourage continued responsiveness on the part of the Air Force when PFAS shows up at installations.
I will, Senator.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Senator Shaheen. Senator Kramer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here, for your willingness to serve, and congratulations to all of you. I have a couple of questions, Dr. Martinez, that I want to focus in on with you, and a little bit of feedback there. I'm going to start with, you're obviously familiar with fertility awareness, so fertility awareness-based method, a natural type of pregnancy prevention that's used by several women. Obviously, it enables them to observe and chart changes in one or more biomarkers. It's a method, of course, that has no side effects. It's relatively inexpensive. Currently, though, there's a lack of access to this at military installations or treatment facilities, and of course, TRICARE doesn't cover it. Would you commit to looking into adding fertility awareness-based methods to the options that our service members have when they're doing their family planning?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. You know, the health care of all service members, including female service members, is of utmost importance to the department. If I get confirmed, I commit to you, we need to look at ways to bring parity for the reproductive health issues relating to our service members. So yes, I'll be looking into those kind of issues, and we need to come about with a parity equation with the rest of the nation and how we address all those issues.
I appreciate that. We'll look forward to that upon your confirmation and to following up. Also, DARPA's pandemic preparedness program, Doctor, was really integral in lots of ways. I mean, it was very successful, but it was particularly integral for antibody discovery programs, and that, of course, led to a therapeutic to combat COVID. And now I think we see, as we look back on that and as we look forward, that these therapies are probably the best defense and maybe even the best offense in combating COVID and perhaps other viruses in the future. So there's a company in North Dakota, Genovac, that's been leading and working with DARPA in antibody discovery. And through them, I've seen just how very fast we're able to respond and how quickly we can develop these targeted responses to other viral threats. So do you agree that we should be devoting as much, if not more, resources for therapeutic discovery and development? And maybe if you just want to elaborate a little bit on what else DoD can do to prepare for future pandemics along these lines.
Senator, my last posting was as commander for Dietrich, and I'm very proud to have been part of that exercise of bringing about new technology that now we see all over serving the country well. I was partnered with DITRA, I was partnered with DARPA, trying to advance all this kind of technology. And by the way, mRNAs, vaccines, that's where they came about from.
Yes.
The genesis of all that new technology was a DoD-based research, program. So if confirmed, sir, I would love to keep being proud member of that team that advances the science for the country and comes out with new solution sets to the new problems that we're going to be facing.
That's great, Doctor. I might then use this opportunity, as I often like to invite you to North Dakota, to Fargo, to see some of what's going on right there. And you can either come in February, that earns you a lot of street cred, or you can come in June, which is just nice to, time to visit. With that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. Now, via WebEx, let me recognize Senator Gillibrand, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to all our nominees. First, for Mr. Storch. Mr. Storch, in your current position as NSA Inspector General, are you familiar with the DoD's IG's ongoing assessment of the response from DoD components to the intrusions of unidentified aerial phenomenon into controlled DoD airspace, as well as UAP activity around naval and air operations? Further, do you think the NSA has been responsive to the DoD's IG inquiries?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I'm afraid that's not an issue with which I am currently familiar. However, if confirmed, I certainly am willing to look into that and to take any action that's appropriate.
Well, thank you. And if confirmed, can I have your commitment to sustain this comprehensive assessment until it reaches its appropriate conclusion, including the possibility of follow-on actions such as audits or investigations if the assessment recommends as much?
Well, again, I honestly am not familiar with that particular review, but as is typical, I think, across the IG community, when a new IG comes in, if they're pending matters, those would continue in the office, and it would be perfectly appropriate to examine them. And if I am confirmed, I can assure you that anything that's pending in the office, I'll give my best attention to. And if there's appropriate follow-up to be done, we'll do it.
Okay, so since you aren't familiar, can you please familiarize yourself with this issue and respond to both of those questions in writing before your confirmation, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Lohman, recently Balfour Beatty Corporation, a privatized military housing contract, pleaded guilty to defrauding the DoD and was ordered to pay $65 million in damages. Balfour Betty's lack of maintenance unnecessarily exposed military families to toxic mold, insect infestations, water leaks, and burst pipes, causing health problems like migraines, asthma, and skin conditions. Despite the fraud, Balfour still manages military housing on installations across the country. In January, I joined 16 of my Democratic colleagues in sending the Department of Defense a letter asking how they plan to protect service members and their families going forward. If confirmed, how do you plan on correcting deficiencies in military privatized housing systems to protect service members and their families from hazardous living conditions?
Thank you, Senator. So our service members sacrifice much in the service of this nation, along with their families. And at a minimum, they deserve safe, clean housing to reside in. And so I understand, Senator, that the Deputy Secretary of Defense signed out a memorandum yesterday creating an Assistant Secretary of Defense for energy installations and the environment. So if confirmed, I will work closely with the ASD, EI&E to ensure that we have a deliberate and planned transition of the resources, the policies, and the personnel necessary to ensure that that organization is stood up and is able to hold contractors such as Balfour Beatty accountable.
Thank you. Mr. Bashar, congratulations and welcome. I have a tough question for you too. A November 2021 DoD IG report highlighted several deficiencies with the department's special victims investigation and prosecution capabilities. The report specifically identified shortcomings within the Air Force's prosecution of special victims cases, finding that the Air Force only assigned special victims certified prosecutors in 6% of eligible cases, which is by far the lowest among the services. It's unacceptable to not assign trained personnel to deal with these complex and sensitive cases. If confirmed, do you intend to assist the Secretary in addressing this issue? And do you further commit to ensuring there are enough trained personnel to handle these sensitive cases?
Senator Gillibrand, fostering a culture of integrity and inclusion within the department is extraordinarily important. I think the diversity is what makes our forces the greatest in the world. I am not familiar in my current position outside of government with the level of staffing, but certainly trying to have a number of qualified investigators able to look into those types of matters would be important. And if confirmed, I would work toward that goal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bashar. And with my last 10 seconds for Mr. Martinez-Lopez, in January, I led a letter calling on TRICARE to expand its coverage to include at-home testing for service members and their families without a physician referral. Will you commit to expanding coverage of the at-home testing in order to ensure our forces' sustained readiness? And I have 3 questions specifically on suicide and mental health capacity, which I will forward for the record so that you can respond to it after the hearing.
Senator, thank you very much for the question. Healthcare parity of the services we offer to our service members, family members, and retirees has to be very important to us. So if confirmed, I'll look at with my team. I'll work hard to understand better what prevents us from achieving parity, and we'll strive for that. If I need help, I probably may come back to ask for help. But I commit that I will look solution sets that will bring healthcare parity for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our nominees.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Let me recognize Senator Blackburn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to each of you, I want to say thank you for your willingness to serve our country and for your family's willingness to allow you to serve our country. Mr. Lohman, I want to come to you first. FSRM is something that we in Tennessee talk about a good bit because, as you're aware, we have a heavy military presence in our state, and this is something important to us. What is the current backlog on FSRM? What is that deficit right now?
Senator, thank you for that question. So FSRM is critical to sustaining readiness of our
what's
services.
the deficit?
Ma'am, I'm not familiar with the current deficit and would have to take that.
I think we want to get that number because it is billions in backlogged projects. And then do you think it is an issue of priority or under-resourcing that DoD has acquired such a backlog?
Senator, thank you again. I understand, Senator, that the Deputy Secretary of Defense has created a new position, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Installations, Energy, and the Environment. So this particular FSRM topic is no longer in the ASDS sustainment portfolio. However, if confirmed, I would be happy to work with the ASD EI&E to better understand the issue and to ensure that you get answers to your question.
Well, that it is a portfolio that has grown so large that it takes the attention of more than one.
Yes, ma'am.
At this point. And it does have an impact, as you're aware, on recruiting, on retention, and on the programs that are being implemented and the projects that are being carried out inside those facilities. So I would like a commitment from you that if you are confirmed, that you will visit Arnold Engineering Development Center in Tennessee with me. This is an Air Force base, and at Arnold, they are carrying out our hypersonics testing. That is where we have our Air Force wind tunnels. It is where autonomous vehicles are being tested for the Air Force. Its importance is growing because of Space Force location in Huntsville, Alabama, which is in close proximity to Arnold on the Tennessee side of the line. So it is quite important to us. Do I have your commitment?
You do, ma'am.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Bashar, welcome. How does the Air Force balance this initiative that Secretary Austin has started with a working group on countering extremist activities? And this is something that from our families of enlisted men and women, I'm hearing a good bit about this, because you've got to hit a balance with that so that you, and you have to look at how it impacts the rights of the person in uniform and their personal beliefs, and the role that the department is going to have there, and protecting these civil liberties. So how do you do that?
Senator Blackburn, I think the overwhelming majority of airmen and guardians, and indeed the 2 million plus members of the total force, serve this country with honor and dignity and consistent with their oaths. There's the working group that's been established to try to provide guidance around the contours of prohibited activities, and if confirmed, trying to strike the very balance that you've spoken about between First Amendment rights and the need for good order and discipline would be a priority.
Thank you. Mr. Storch, I want to come to you on this COVID vaccine issue that we have with DoD. At Fort Campbell, we've heard a little bit about this, as you can imagine. And by the way, Mr. Chairman, I noticed that we have a series of letters from Senator Johnson in his capacity. Have these been submitted to the nominees or submitted to the record for discussion?
Excuse me, ma'am?
Okay, I'm referencing the letters.
There are a series of letters that Senator Tuberville...
Have they been submitted to...
They have not been submitted to the record yet.
Okay, let's submit them to the record and
without
as
objection.
questions for response. I think that would be important to you, Mr. Storch. I would like to know where your views are on implementing the vaccine mandate on civilian personnel and on our DoD contractors, and then with our men and women in uniform, how the consideration is given for their medical and religious exemption procedures, how we're addressing natural immunity, which is stronger than the immunity received from a vaccine. I'm over time, so let's do all of that for the record. That gets you off the hook right now. And Dr. Martinez, well, okay, Mr. Chairman, can he give his answer?
A brief answer, please, for Senator Blackburn.
Yeah, yes, Senator. All I was going to really say is that, IGs are authoritative when we speak based upon our work. And so I'm aware that the DoD IG is doing some work in the areas you've discussed. And as I indicated previously, if there's additional work to be done after I'm confirmed, we'll look into that as well. I can't make that assessment now. So that's it. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. And could I ask the witnesses to move their microphones closer? That'll help us all hear you much better. Thank you very much. Now let me recognize Senator Blumenthal, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to second the remarks made by Senator Shaheen about the importance of combating pollution from PFAS, very important to Connecticut, where some of the runoffs from our military bases have threatened civilian populations. But PFAS is only one of the chemicals that seems to be emanating from bases around the United States, maybe around the world. I'm sure that my colleague, Senator Hirono, has focused on the Navy's Red Hill fuel storage facility in Hawaii in her preparation for this hearing. Camp Lejeune in North Carolina has literally hundreds, maybe thousands of families severely adversely affected by toxic water that caused cancer and other very serious health issues for thousands of veterans in their families. My colleagues and I, Senator Tillis and I, have led an effort to give those families a measure of justice. It's called the Camp Lejeune Justice Act, bipartisan legislation that would correct unfair legal barriers and enable people affected by toxic exposure at Camp Lejeune to present evidence of exposure before a court, which right now they can't practically do. And I've called on the Department of Defense to provide a national audit of all military installations to determine where contaminants are present. Mr. Lohman, will you commit to doing a national audit of all military installations to determine where contaminants are, what can be done to stop them, and how to provide justice to families and veterans affected?
Senator, thank you. So our service members deserve to serve on installations free of contamination. And so if confirmed, what I can commit to is working very closely with the new Assistant Secretary of Defense for Installations, Environment, and Energy to ensure that we gain an understanding of where those contaminants lie. Sorry, tripping on that word, Senator. So where those contamination areas are on our installations, and then initiating the appropriate actions to remediate that contamination.
Well, don't you think that a national audit of military installations is a good idea? And I know you're going to work closely with the new secretary and so forth and so on, but you personally, don't we need to do it?
Senator, I do believe that we need to identify where those areas of contamination are and what is driving the contamination, and then taking on the necessary and appropriate actions to remediate those as necessary. Our service members absolutely deserve a clean environment to live on and operate from.
Well, I really think that a systematic change here is required. Appointing a new assistant secretary maybe will help, but what's really needed is action in this area. And I would like to ask you, do you support the right of individuals exposed to toxic water at Camp Lejeune since 1953 to bring legal action against the United States government, as would be provided in the Camp Lejeune Justice Act?
Senator, I'm not familiar with that particular issue, but believe strongly that wherever contamination occurs and personnel that have been contaminated, that there is redress available to those service members and that be addressed appropriately. I will commit to working closely within the department, within the senior Army leadership, and certainly within the legal channels to better understand that issue. And if confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for sustainment, wherever sustainment activities are contributing to that contamination, developing the necessary policies and processes to remediate that as quickly as possible.
Well, I appreciate that answer. I will be following up with more questions for the record. Mr. Storch, you and I talked at some length about your record in NSA, which I thought was commendable for emphasizing transparency, and I hope that you will cooperate with this committee in trying to move toward declassifying more information that the public needs and deserves, particularly, for example, on civilian casualties of drone strikes, where IG reports, I think, could be extremely informative and valuable to public understanding of the perhaps unforeseen and unintended effects that have to be avoided in the future. So I appreciate your commitment to transparency, and I believe we have your commitment to continuing it.
Senator, I believe very strongly that a core function of IGs is to promote transparency in the work that we do, and I'm going to do everything I can if I'm confirmed to continue that.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Cotton, please.
Dr. Martinez, I want to speak about the Defense Health Agency. When it was founded a few years back, one concern that we heard is that services might pull back staffing from joint medical billets if they perceived higher needs in their own commands. This was enough of a concern for the committee that in the most recent NDAA, we passed a provision that required the services to maintain 85% of the manning requirements from the 2016 Joint Table of Distribution at joint hospital and clinic settings. I'm concerned that what we heard at the time when the DHA was founded, it may be coming to pass. I know you've been out for a few years. As you prepared for the hearing, prepared to take on this responsibility, is this a concern you've heard that services may be pulling back somewhat from these joint medical billets to make sure their own facilities are fully staffed?
Senator, as I'm coming in, the number one issue I'm concerned about is the readiness of the force. So if I'm confirmed, I'll work with the team to understand better your question, the particulars of decrements or plus-ups, whatever is required. But the litmus test must be, are we going to create an environment that encourages readiness? So, or are we taking away from that? If the answer is we're taking away from that, we have to relook. If the answer is we're going in the right direction, I'll reinforce that issue. So if confirmed, again, I commit that will be my driving force, and I hope that I can bring positive change to the military health system.
Well, thank you. I look forward to working with you on that. Like I said, I know you've been out for a while, so I don't expect you to have all the details ready at your fingertips. Maybe after you've been on the job, after confirmation, in 30 days, we can talk about where manning stands at all the joint medical facilities, and especially at the Crown Jewel at Walter Reed up the road.
Senator, it would be my honor.
Another issue that I've heard some concerns about in recent years is the amount of time it takes to authorize military health care for all government employees who are experiencing symptoms from what's become called anomalous health incidents, also known as the Havana syndrome. This is not a question or a concern about the source of so-called Havana syndrome symptoms or who may or may not be responsible for them. I know that's been in the media a lot lately. This is simply about those people who are experiencing these symptoms and making sure that they get timely care. Again, we were concerned enough about it on this committee that in the most recent NDAA, we directed the Secretary of Defense to provide timely access for an assessment subject to space availability at the National Intrepid Center or any other appropriate military medical treatment facility, and to furnish that care to all U.S. government employees and their family members who may experience these symptoms. If confirmed, Can you ensure that government employees and their family members who experience anomalous health incident symptoms can get timely access to evaluation and treatment at a military hospital or at the National Intrepid Center?
Senator, I'll work with the other departments and agencies, and yes, I'll work hard to streamline the access to those that require them.
Thank you. I think it's really important. Obviously, these incidents are centered mostly around our embassies, where we do have uniformed service members as defense attaches or other positions. But Americans who are serving those positions, whether they're at state or another government agency, also need the benefit of the expertise I think that the military brings to bear. Mr. Lohman, question for you. I've recently introduced bipartisan legislation with Senator Kelly called the Reshore Act that would secure the supply chain for rare earth elements and several other critical minerals. It's recently come to my attention that the Defense Logistic Agency's National Defense Stockpile has been dangerously underfunded for years. I'm greatly concerned that we rely too heavily on Chinese processing facilities to refine the raw materials necessary for our systems. If confirmed, can you commit to me to making sure that the National Defense Stockpile's budget and authorization requests match the requirements that are set forth by law?
Senator, there will be no greater advocate in the department for the necessary materials and the resources needed, one, to sustain readiness, but two, to mitigate and build resiliency within our national defense supply chains.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I just want to stress that, again, this is a solvable problem. The irony about rare earth elements is that they are anything but rare. You could probably go out on the National Mall and dig up most of them. What is rare is the actual mining and the manufacturing processing of it, which we've foolishly outsourced to China over recent decades, and that it's vital that we get that production out of China back into the United States and also encourage our partners to produce those minerals and refine them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator Rono, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome and congratulations to all of our nominees. Normally, I start each nomination hearing with a series of questions related to a nominee's fitness for service. However, based on the severity of the ongoing water contamination crisis on Oahu, I'm going to submit those questions for the record. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Red Hill. It is a massive underground fuel storage facility consisting of 20 massive World War II tanks located 100 feet over Oahu's aquifer that holds 250 million gallons of fuel to support military operations across the Indo-Pacific. This storage facility has contaminated the Navy's water system, displacing almost 4,000 families since December. As a result, the state of Hawaii has directed the Navy to defuel the tanks. The Department of Defense estimates the cost of the crisis response alone to date is almost $500 million, and that does not include defueling the tanks or the cost of upgrades to do so safely. The Navy must immediately resolve the drinking water crisis, and the Department of Defense must develop a long-term plan for strategic fuel storage. The people of Hawaii deserve a resolution to the Red Hill crisis as quickly as possible, including a decision regarding the potential closing of Red Hill. The fastest way to do this is through the state of Hawaii's ongoing hearing to determine whether to provide or deny a permit to operate Red Hill. At the end of the day, the health and safety of the people of Hawaii and military members and their families is my top priority, a goal shared by the Secretary of Defense. A fundamental component of health and safety is access to clean drinking water, a goal we should all be focused on. Question for Mr. Storch. In November, I led the effort, along with my colleagues from the Hawaii delegation, in calling for the DoD Inspector General to start an independent investigation into Navy oversight and operation at the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility. Even if the state of Hawaii declines to give Red Hill a permit, it is imperative that investigation continues. The people of Hawaii deserve answers about what happened in order to mend the distrust of the military that has resulted from this crisis. Mr. Storch, if confirmed, will you continue the current IG investigation into Red Hill with the urgency it deserves?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I am aware of the pendency of an evaluation. I'm not familiar with the current status of it, but if I'm confirmed, certainly I'll work with the team at the OIG to ensure that it's appropriately followed through on and any appropriate recommendations made, and those are followed through on as well. If I can, I would just mention with regard to Senator Gillibrand's question, I don't think I answered it very articulately, but it would essentially be the same answer that I'm not aware as the IG of NSA of the current status of pending evaluations at other offices, but if I'm confirmed, I'll make sure that we follow through as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lohman, a long-term concern I know the military has with respect to Red Hill is the national security impact that defueling and shutting down the facility could have. I've spoken with Deputy Secretary Hicks several times about this concern. She has launched a thorough review of the facility's long-term future to include the option of permanently defueling Red Hill and is analyzing the distribution of fuel reserves for operations in the Pacific Theater. And you mentioned already in your testimony that you indicated the Indo-Pacific needs, which is, of course, a huge AOR, and the supplies that will be required, that includes fuel. So that's something that you've already acknowledged. The department needs a storage and logistics solution for the strategic fuel reserves, and this is an issue that will likely require extensive funds and direction from Congress. Mr. Lohman, if confirmed, you will be responsible for overseeing the fuel requirements for the department. Very briefly, how do you intend to approach this issue?
Senator, thank you. I'm aware of a couple of ongoing initiatives. One you referenced already, the DSD's sponsored study of the strategic positioning of petroleum supplies in the Indo-Pacific at echelon, and whether any changes in the positioning of that fuel can be made. The second one, ma'am, are establishing an end-to-end common operating picture of our petroleum supplies, using advanced data analytics and AI where appropriate so that we can better manage the flow, the consumption, and the overall transportation requirements. So if confirmed, I will work very closely with DLA, U.S. Transcom, the COCOMs, and the services to ensure that, one, these initiatives have the appropriate oversight at the department, and two, that they remain resourced and on track for successful conclusion.
Mr. Chairman, with regard to Red Hill, it is highly likely that the state of Hawaii will not grant a permit for the continuing operations of Red Hill, and therefore we are going to need to address how we're going to meet the fueling needs of the Indo-Pacific AOR. I have some other questions that I'd like to submit for the record, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Rona. Senator Tillis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll defer to Senator Sullivan and respond.
Senator Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to my friend Senator Tillis. Gentlemen, congratulations on your nomination. You know, as the chairman of this important committee knows, Alaska constitutes 3 pillars of America's military might. We are the cornerstone of missile defense for the whole nation. All the radar, ground-based missile interceptors are almost all in Alaska. We're the hub of air combat power. By the end of this year, we'll have over 100 fifth-generation fighters based in Alaska. No place on the planet Earth has 100 fifth-gen fighters in one location. And we're a platform for expeditionary forces to deploy anywhere in the world on a moment's notice. We're very close to a lot of the hot spots in Asia, much closer than any place in the United States, and even places much closer than places like Australia. A lot of people don't know that. So whether you've been to Alaska or not, I'd like to get a commitment from each of you early in your tenure to come up to Alaska, either with me or with your team, to see firsthand the critical importance of my state to the national security of our nation. Mr. Storch, why don't we just go down the line? The answer is yes.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to make sure my mic is on. Yes, I've never been to Alaska. I know it's an important place. I'd be honored to visit there and understand the issues. Sir.
Right, so you're committing to come to Alaska?
Sure.
Yes, okay, great. Dr. Martinez?
Sir, the answer is yes.
Great, thank you. Good.
Senator, Alaska is critical and it's positioned uniquely on the globe. So I commit to, one, coming to Alaska to better understand the unique environment and challenges that exist there. I want to work with the ASDA as well as my staff and the services to ensure that the sustainment capabilities in Alaska are up to the task to maintain readiness and ensure that combat power. So yes, I'll come visit.
Thank you. Mr. Bashar?
Yes.
Thank you. I want to follow up on Senator Hirono's talk about Red Hill. I was recently out in the Indo-PACOM AOR, and I will tell you, I mean, I don't have to. She's doing a great job, but this is a huge issue, and I certainly want to work with her in this committee. When we're talking about strategic location, Mr. Lohman, I'd actually like to get your commitment as you're looking at the really complex issues here, and they are complex, but it's logistics in the Indo-PACOM theater. One area that hasn't got a lot of a discussion on this, the U.S. Navy has been thinking strongly about warming up the very strategically located naval base, former naval base of Adak, Alaska. It's further west than Hawaii. It's way out in the Aleutian Island chain, but it's a big former base with massive fuel storage capabilities. I'm not sure it's the answer, but it's something that certainly should be looked at as this really complicated and difficult issue in Hawaii is being addressed. Can I get your commitment, Mr. Lohman, to just take a look at that as one potential part of the solution? As Senator Hirono mentioned, having the logistics and fueling capability in the Indo-PACOM region is enormously important, especially to our Navy fleet. This is one element of a potential solution that hasn't been looked at, and I think it should be looked at. Can I get your commitment to look at that?
Senator, I think all options in this case should be on the table. And so if confirmed, I'll work with Transcom, DLA, and the other OSD stakeholders to, one, expeditiously complete the review and the study and make the appropriate recommendations.
Great, thank you. And I do want to work with Senator Hirono on this as well. Mr. Storch and Mr. Bashar, one issue that I've been focused on, because I think it's been misreported, and to be perfectly honest, I think it's been a blight, unfortunately, from some members of this administration on the military force itself, is this issue on extremism. We don't want any extremist actors in our military. Unfortunately, I think when Undersecretary Call came before this committee, he said that stamping out systemic racism in the ranks was one of his top priorities. I asked him, wow, that's a pretty broad statement. Do you have any data on that? He had no data, of course. The media wildly reports this as some kind of giant crisis in the military. We had a member here who actually said estimates are 10% of the force could be branded as extremists or racists. When the military actually did the study, finally, they found that less than 100 cases in a force of over 2 million were undertaking prohibited extremist activity. Now, look, we want zero, but that's 0.005% of the force. So can I get your commitment as you're looking at these issues to make sure that you're reminding people that, as Mr. Bashar said, these are the best and brightest in the country. And wild claims that the Washington Post and other media constantly throw out there, they're clueless, really besmirches the men and women in the force who do what less than 1% of people in our country do, which is raise their hand and volunteer to protect the Constitution and their fellow Americans. So, Mr. Storch, Mr. Bashar, can I get your commitment on that issue to make sure you're looking at it with the data, not with these wild claims? Undersecretary Call was no help on this. But it's a really important issue, and a lot of members are feeling kind of like these accusations are directed at them, which it's really outrageous. Can I get a comment from both of you on this?
Senator, as you're no doubt aware, the OIG is doing work in this area currently. I certainly can tell you that if I'm confirmed, I will ensure that we are following the facts wherever they are and reporting them out as appropriate. Absolutely.
Thank
Senator
you.
Sullivan, you have my commitment to study the issue closely with the type of balance that you've just articulated.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Next, let's recognize Senator King via WebEx.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Starting with Dr. Martinez-Lopez, there is a epidemic within the military and within our military veteran community, and that is suicide. I call it a disease of despair. And we have taken various steps, but I hope that this attending to this matter and working on prevention, identification of high risks, how to intervene properly to prevent it will be one of your priorities, because this is literally killing both active duty military members and particularly veterans.
Senator, thank you very much for championing this cause. One suicide is too many. It's a daughter, it's a husband, brother, sister, and I've been at the receiving end as a physician where I've dealt with this, and it's devastating not only to the family, it's devastating to the whole force. So I come with energy to, if confirmed, to tackle this issue. We need to bring new eyes. I will bring eyes from academia, from other places. We need to bring about new technology, new ways of looking at ways to mitigate this. We need to look at expanding the mental health services in such a way that they hit the mark and really prevent this awful occurrence. So again, if confirmed, that I commit to really work hard initially on this issue, sir.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. This is not strictly related, but this is not a medical issue, but a software issue. We continue to have this frustrating problem of a lack of interoperability between the Department of Defense medical record system and the Veterans Administration. Will you give me a commitment to really dig into this? Because this is, as I say, this is software. This isn't, we're not trying to cure all the world's diseases here. We're just trying to have two systems talk to one another. Please take this on also as a project.
Senator, the electronic health record is key to many of the new ways to deliver health care, right? So it is a critical component to not only the service member, but the veteran. So we have, you've confirmed, you have my commitment that I will work with the Department of VA to promote this and make sure that not only deploys in the Department of Defense, but lessons learned from the Department of Defense are transferred to the Department of Veteran Affairs, because we owe that to our service members, and we owe that to the veterans that so proudly serve.
It also relates back to the suicide issue. I've met with veterans and people working on this issue, and it appears that a significant percentage of the suicides take place in the first 2 or 3 years after separation from active duty. So again, this handoff should be seamless and not tangled up in software confusion in terms of conveyance of records. So I appreciate your attention to that. Mr. Lohman, in terms of readiness, one thing I would urge you to do is to benchmark our performance in the Department of Defense against the private sector, whether it's the private airlines, for example, in terms of readiness of their aircraft, commercial shipping compared with the Navy. One of my mottos is, does it work, and how do you know? And benchmarking is one way to achieve that kind of knowledge. I hope this is something that you'll focus upon in your work on readiness.
Thanks, Senator. This will be a priority for me if confirmed. One thing the department has spent quite a bit of time on over the last decade is the introduction of prognostics, things like condition-based maintenance plus, sensors, the ability to develop very precise and very finite data sets to understand where our readiness issues are. And so that ability, coupled with advanced data analytics, give us the ability to begin benchmarking to common platforms in the commercial sector and differentiate any deltas in performance given military, the uniqueness of military missions However, if confirmed, I will work with my staff to continue the momentum in that area.
Well, I'm out of time. I'm going to submit a couple of questions for the record. One is ubiquitous 3D printing capability on our ships and at our bases, and also the issue of the allocation of KC-46s in terms of the aerial refueling capacity. I thank you all for your testimony. Congratulations on your nominations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Tillis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, gentlemen, on your nominations. I may not be able to ask all of you questions, but you can leave the room knowing that you have my vote for confirmation. Mr. Storch, I want to start with you. Once you're confirmed, what would you do to investigate the planning, execution, and aftermath of the withdrawal from Afghanistan and the DoD's role in it?
So the OIG has jurisdiction over all programs and operations of the department. And additionally, as I'm sure you're aware, it serves as the lead IG for Operation Freedom Sentinel. While I am not in the position to, forecast any particular reviews or the like, if I am confirmed, I would look forward to meeting with the team at the OIG, to consulting with the Department of State and the USAID IGs, and also coordinating as appropriate with SIGAR, with the Special IG for Afghanistan Reconstruction, to determine what oversight would be appropriate. And I very much would welcome the opportunity to engage with the committee as to its thoughts in the area.
One of the things that I thank you for that answer. I was personally involved in August with trying to get families and SIV holders, U.S. citizens, out of Afghanistan. We were successful, but we only scratched the surface of the number of cases that my office is tracking. One of the things became very apparent to me is that we were providing net incremental information to the State Department and to the DoD on SIV holders. I mean, literally capturing paperwork and documentation that you would have thought would have just been in the normal course of business, how we keep track of those who are working alongside of our service members in combat situations. So I think that needs attention. We need to systematize it. We've taken a little bit of a hit reputationally for how we've handled some of the SIV holders, how thousands of people are still in Afghanistan. So I think that I'd be very interested in understanding the system that is in place, and why on earth at 2:30 in the morning am I discussing the transmission of documents from unit commanders and pictures of SIV holders to an agency that you would have thought would have had some of that information readily available. I think it would have probably expedited some of their departures. So that's another area. And then finally, on an interagency perspective, I think I saw wills kind of get sand in them with the interagency handoff. I don't know how that works because that swims outside of your lanes, but it seems like there has to be an analysis of the interagency interaction and how we can do a better job if, God forbid, we ever find ourselves in a situation like we did in Afghanistan last year. So thank you for that. Dr. Martinez, I know that you have been supportive of the Center for Regenerative Medicine, my friend Dr. Atala down at Wake Forest, that program in your past role. You've been supportive of it. Once you're confirmed, can I expect that you will continue to support that and other similar efforts in your new role?
Senator, the readiness of the force, medical, is critical to what we do. Part of that is bringing new solution sets to questions that we want to answer and questions we don't even know we need to ask. That's how research works. So if confirmed, I will continue the effort across this broad spectrum of research, medical research, to bring solution sets that our service members so deserve.
Well, I think what we're doing at Wake and across research institutions nationwide is very promising and something that I hope that we can continue to support and fund and encourage. I just want to echo what I want to take a slightly different tact on the electronic health record. I'm on the VA committee. We've been working on that implementation. We have to understand that is still several years away before it's fully implemented within the VA. But I was glad to hear the Secretary of the VA is starting up a joint office with the DoD so that they can start tracking and making sure that we have that seamless transfer of data at the right time so that we can get to a more precise analysis of a service member once they transition, have the sorts of interventions and things that we need in place, and the medical record is going to be critically important. So do I have your commitment that you will be working with the VA to make sure that as they implement, we don't miss that opportunity to have that seamless transition and long-term cooperation so that these platforms continue to be interoperable?
Senator, yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Lohman, just very briefly, give me an idea of what you think about the current reforms that we've seen, acquisition reforms. This is an area where I spend a lot of time. I think that there's still gold on the floors for additional reforms and efficiencies there. Tell me a little bit about your perspective on the current reforms that have been implemented and go-forward strategy.
Senator, I think the reforms that have been implementing are helping. We've got some more work to do. I will tell you that in the product support manager's role and the early development of the sustainment strategies before you begin producing the end item is critical to containing life cycle cost. And so that'll be one, if confirmed as the ASDS, one of my focus areas will be to make sure that the product support managers have the appropriate authorities, they have the data analytic tools, and they are at the table developing, along with their acquisition brethren, developing the contract frameworks and the organic industrial-based strategies that will help to contain sustainment costs, but also produce the readiness the department needs.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Senator Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to all of our nominees, and welcome to your families who are here or watching remotely. Mr. Lohman, you've been nominated to be the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment, and that means that for now you'll be overseeing the military's housing program for service members. Now, no one should have to live with black mold, leaking and collapsed roofs, or exposed electrical wires in their home. It is indefensible that that was the case for military families. A Department of Defense Inspector General report last year found that the department is dragging its feet on two major reforms that Congress passed to address these deplorable conditions: creating a public complaint database for tenants and a tenant's bill of right. 2 years in, and neither of these have been done. So, Mr. Lohman, I know these things take time to stand up, but will you make sure that a publicly available complaint database is created this year? 2022?
Senator, thank you. So I couldn't agree more that our service members deserve the right to live in housing that is safe, it is suitable, and it is healthy.
Good. Thank you. I just want a commitment here. Am I going to get this database in 2022?
Senator, the DSD just created a new position, an Assistant Secretary of Defense for the environment, energy, and installations. So that portfolio has been removed from the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment's portfolio. What I can commit to, if confirmed, is working with the ASD, EI&E, for a smooth and deliberate transition of resources, and as well as the policies and personnel to make sure that these
But you can't put your name behind getting this done. It's a database, a complaint database. This is not rocket science. And we're in year 3 of people who want to be able to tell you about things like rat infections and black mold. I would think that the military would want to know about this.
Senator, I agree. And I work very closely with the ASD, EI&E to make sure that organization makes progress on this.
Well, I would like to hear you make your commitment on this. And the same is true for a tenant's Bill of Rights. Is this also just a lateral pass to somebody else?
No, ma'am, I'll commit to my personal involvement in better understanding the issues surrounding
I appreciate the involvement. I want a commitment to get it done. We're in year 3. This is not hard.
Senator, I certainly understand your question. And if confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment, I will do everything in my authority to make sure that these two things get completed this year.
Well, I'm not doing great here, but I've got more requests, but I'll put those in my QFRs. Let me ask another line of questions here. Mr. Storch, You've been nominated to serve as the DoD Inspector General, which makes you the Pentagon's top watchdog. Your job, obviously, is going to be to shine a light on waste and misconduct and abuses of power, and also to tell us when officials or organizations are thwarting your investigations or trying to hide your findings from the public. And there are a lot of ways that might happen, but I want to talk to you about the one that's keeping me up at night right now. I'm becoming very concerned about how much the Pentagon is keeping from the public through pseudo-classification. That is, classifying something that doesn't need to be kept secret, classifying it just so that there's less public scrutiny. Mr. Storch, do you commit to notifying this committee if you believe that your work is being wrongfully restricted or pseudo-classified or over-classified?
Senator, this is an area in which I do have some experience, not necessarily with pseudo-classification, but when I came on board as the NSA IG, we weren't doing any public reporting at all at our office. As I say, we basically just had a page on the agency site, which didn't have any content. And we've worked hard to advance transparency in our oversight work there in the ways that I discussed in my opening statement, and worked very well with the agency to make sure that happens. And I've got to say, we've gotten good cooperation with agency leadership. So I'm going to work on that. I would work with the agency to make sure that it's done right. And if I have any problems, I absolutely wouldn't hesitate to come to the committee.
That's what I want to hear.
Yes,
you know, I want to give you an example of where this pseudo-classification hinders the oversight process. Numerous investigations by the press, by independent analysts, and by civil society watchdogs have shown that our investigations into civilian casualties are seriously flawed, and that is probably too kind a statement. It is a broken system. The DoD IG has looked into this as well, but many of the DoD IG's findings about these failures are completely redacted, not because they are classified, but because they are marked, quote, for official use only. I suspect that more oversight from DoD IG would help us fix this broken system, but it's not going to happen unless we enhance transparency significantly. So I appreciate your comments on this. I anticipate you're going to be a partner in getting this done. If you have problems, you're going to come talk to us, and we'll get it straightened out. We have a right to know. The public has a right to know. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hawley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to all the nominees. Thank you for being here. Mr. Storch, let me start with you. The Special IG for Afghanistan, SIGAR, has provided invaluable reporting on Afghanistan reconstruction efforts and activities through audits, through inspections, through investigations, and in my view, an unyielding commitment to transparency. Now, that office, unfortunately, has not been well supported, I don't think, by this committee. In fact, various members have tried to shut it down multiple different times. Let me ask you this. In the aftermath of the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, it is my view it's more important than ever that SIGAR be able to perform its duties in an independent manner, and I underline and emphasize independent, without interference. So do I have your commitment to ensure that SIGAR is able to continue doing its work free from interference from anybody, including your office, if you're confirmed?
Senator Hawley, I'm not familiar with all the background you described, but I can tell you that I've spent my entire time in the IG community working with other IGs collaboratively to try to advance oversight. So whether that's with SIGAR or other IGs who might have interest in that very important space, I would anticipate working collaboratively as appropriate.
That's not quite the answer I'm looking for. I want a commitment from you that SIGAR will be able to do its work free from interference from your office if you're confirmed.
I don't believe any IG should interfere with the work of another IG, and certainly if I'm confirmed, I'll make sure that doesn't happen. I would do everything I could to ensure that we're working collaboratively and cooperatively as appropriate.
Okay, so that's a yes. You will not, if you're confirmed, you will not in any way interfere or undermine the independence of SIGAR, who does not report to you under current.
I'm sorry. That's what I'm trying to get at, is they don't report to me, so I don't have any jurisdiction over them.
Good.
But I certainly
You won't try to absorb them. You won't try to take away their.
I'm not familiar with any issues like that, Senator, about jurisdiction. So my understanding is.
Well, I'm not asking if you're familiar or not. I'm asking you what your intentions are, and what I would like to hear and would hope to hear. This should be an easy question. Is that you will not interfere with SIGAR in any way. You will let them continue to be independent. You will not engage in any mission creep from your office that would seek to undermine SIGAR's independence and authority. Can you say yes to that?
I certainly would not do anything, yes, that would interfere with the independence and operations of another IG. When you talk about mission creep, I just want to be completely clear. There are many times in the IG community are issues regarding who's going to work on what, right? And so what I'm committing to you to do is that if there are such issues, I would work with the other IG, with my team and with their team to determine what the right result is. So I'm not in a position to give you any more specific answer, but that's the way I've always worked in the IG community, and if I'm confirmed, it's the way I will work.
Let me ask you this. Do I have your commitment to support this committee's efforts and others' efforts to fully investigate DoD's role in the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal, including by, this is the important part, conducting your own investigation, sharing data, and any other relevant measures? Would you commit to working with us?
So I would be pleased to work with the committee to identify any and all areas for appropriate oversight, and certainly will report robustly to the committee regarding the results of that. I can't, and I'm not in the position to identify particular areas at this time, but both in our role as the lead IG for OFS and generally with jurisdiction over all programs and department operations of the department, we would examine any appropriate issues.
Let's come back to SIGAR for a second. SIGAR has long reported that DoD has overclassified information regarding the Afghan forces' performance and other aspects of the Afghanistan reconstruction effort, including limiting SIGAR's ability to provide the American people with a full account because of this. Do you share SIGAR's concerns about overclassification related to the Afghanistan reconstruction effort? And now that effort has ended, would you support efforts to declassify as much of that information as possible?
So I'm not familiar with specific concerns in that area. I will tell you as a general matter, I have worked very hard to promote transparency and to do everything I can to fight overclassification. I don't think things should be marked E for embarrassing or anything like that. As I said, we've gotten good support at NSA and our oversight work there. And if I'm confirmed, I'm going to keep working to promote transparency.
So when it comes to SIGAR's specific concerns about overclassification over a period of years and decades, you're not familiar with that? You don't have a view on that?
No, and nor do I believe it would be appropriate for me to express one. I haven't been confirmed. But if I'm confirmed, I certainly will look into the issue, and I'll commit to you that we'll do the right thing on it. And happy to engage with you on these specific issues.
Well, are you concerned, when you say you don't think it would be appropriate to express a view, I mean, are you willing to express a view on the dangers of overclassification? I mean, here's what I'm getting at. I've heard multiple members of this committee since the fall of Afghanistan say that it's unbelievable that we didn't know that the Afghan security forces were so badly prepared. I mean, who could have thought that they would have collapsed in the fashion they did? I tell you who could have thought it, SIGAR. Why? Because they issued report after report saying that the Afghan security forces weren't appropriately trained, that they weren't prepared, that the Pentagon was making it difficult for SIGAR to get any information, that DoD kept changing the metrics by which to assess the readiness of the Afghan security forces. SIGAR has warned for years that what would happen in Afghanistan is exactly what did happen. So I think it's important that that entity be able to get the information it needs and actually report to the American people. Because frankly, I think the American people were pretty much lied to for years by multiple administrations, unfortunately, multiple administrations of both parties, unfortunately. So I'm pretty concerned about this issue. And what I'd like to hear from you is a commitment to say that you think that overclassification is a real problem, that you're going to work with SIGAR to make sure that they can get the classified material that they need, and that ultimately we make as much of this material as possible to the American public, available to the American public. Can you commit to that?
Senator, I am committed to doing everything I can in my current job, and if I'm confirmed in a future job as the DoD IG, to fighting overclassification and ensuring that all appropriate information is out. What I was trying to say respectfully is I don't have the information currently as the NSA IG regarding the nature of information at DoD IG or SIGAR. But what I can tell you is if I'm confirmed, I will do everything appropriate to fight overclassification and ensure that appropriate information is made public.
My time has expired. I'll have some additional questions for the record for the rest of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Now let me recognize via WebEx Senator Manchin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you for your willingness to serve. Let me start with Mr. Storch. Mr. Storch, the Office of Department of Defense Inspector General has consistently reported on problems DoD has in protecting its cyber system, its networks, and the data. Coming from the National Security Agency, I know you're very aware of how important cybersecurity protection is. So if confirmed, what would be your plan for assessing and reporting on the effectiveness, controls, and processes being implemented by DoD intelligence community agencies to protect our classified systems from insider and external threats?
Senator, as you say, I've been very involved in doing oversight regarding cyber issues as the NSA IG and also in my role as the vice chair of the SIGI Tech Committee, where we recently started a cyber working group in which my folks are very actively participating. These are significant issues across the entire government, and if I am confirmed, I would look forward to working with the team at DoD IG to identify the areas of greatest risk in the cyberspace and ensuring that we're doing robust oversight over it. At NSA, we have an active cyber and IT group within our audit division that does that sort of work. And if I am the IG at DoD, I'll look forward to continuing that.
Mr. Lohman, we need to ensure our military installations are able to carry out the critical missions, even in the event of interruptions to the commercial power grid, off-post water supplies, or other challenges surrounding land, water, and airspace, whether it comes from bad actors or just extreme weather. So if confirmed, how will you make this a priority in your portfolio? And have you already evaluated or have you all been looking at that?
Senator, thank you. So our installations play a critical role in projecting power, regardless on where that's required. So energy independence on our installation and building resilience on those installations to include alternative energy is critically important. That includes, of course, water. I understand, Senator, that the Deputy Secretary of Defense published a memo yesterday creating, because of the importance of this portfolio, a separate Assistant Secretary of Defense for energy installations and the environment. If confirmed, I'll work very closely to ensure a deliberate transition of personnel, resources, and policies needed to achieve these energy independent goals.
Thank you. Mr. Lohman, back to you again. As the military focuses on the great power competition, we're going to need to understand that a future conflict may be fought in an environment where access to our logistic networks would be contested. Unlike the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, that we will not be able to necessarily count upon a reliable, constant flow of supply from the United States. We kind of saw hints of this predicament during the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Their landlocked nature and our poor net relations with the neighbors complicated our efforts to retrograde personnel and material. So the brunt of the retrograde was kind of borne by a limited number of strategic lift assets, such as our 130, C-130s, and C-17s, completing multiple 3,000-mile round trips between Kuwait and Afghanistan. So what will you do as Assistant Secretary of Defense to ensure the resilience of our global logistic networks and prepare the whole force to sustain and fight and win in a contested environment?
Senator, thanks for that question. As you know, global operations require a global supply chain. And so this includes not only posture at echelon, where we position those supplies, but it also includes the sustained readiness of our inter and intra-theater lift capabilities, represented by C-130, C-17, and others, but also our sea lift capabilities. And so if confirmed, I'll work with the military departments, the ASDS staff, to, one, ensure the necessary resources are allocated and balanced with the modernization programs to sustain readiness of those current capabilities. But in the sea lift fleet, work with the Navy and TRANSCOM to understand the recapitalization strategy, ensure that we are balancing the buy new versus recapitalization buy used. And then finally, Senator, would work very closely with the services and ASD acquisition to ensure that we are balancing the service modernization strategies and we're appropriately allocating the necessary resources to sustain readiness of our current fleets.
Thank you. Appreciate so much all y'all's input, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Senator Manchin. Let me recognize Senator Peters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to each of you, congratulations on your nomination. It's good to see all of you here before us. Mr. Storch, I'm chairman of Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, and I've been a long advocate for reforms to safeguard the integrity of the Inspector General. The role is absolutely critical for us to maintain integrity in the government, and the independence of IGs is particularly important. And so certainly I hope, if confirmed, I will continue to count on your support for that work. But could you give this committee some indication as to how you approach the job as IG, particularly as it relates to the independence necessary to perform the job effectively and professionally?
Absolutely, Senator. I think that's one of the most critical aspects about our IG system is that IGs are able to independently exercise oversight, and that's what I think gives our work credibility and makes it authoritative. And critical to that are a couple things. One is, I think, maintaining the appropriate posture vis-a-vis the agency and its leadership. It's sort of, you don't want to be too close and you don't want to be too far away. You want to be close enough so you're getting the information so they understand you're going to be an honest broker. You're going to look at the information and report things out that'll help the agency to improve its operations. But on the other hand, you don't want to get too close and be captured by the mission, particularly places with compelling mission. And so that's really critical. I think it's something I watched IG Horowitz do at Justice extraordinarily well and tried to learn from him. And as I've tried to do that at NSA, and if I'm confirmed, I'll do that at DoD. The final thing I'll say quickly is I think the dual reporting and the relationship with the Hill is critical to maintaining that independence so that the agency understands that we not only keep the agency fully and timely informed, but we also keep the Congress fully and timely informed. And maintaining both of those lines of communication is critical to ensuring the independence that we need.
You know, I'm also very committed to ensuring that whistleblowers are protected. They play an incredibly valuable role for us to identify potential waste, fraud, and abuse all across all levels of the federal government. But a 2019 GAO report found that the Department of Defense IG and the military service IGs did not meet timeliness and quality goals for handling whistleblower complaints. So my question to you, sir, is if confirmed, will you commit to making whistleblower protection a top priority in your office and implementing the GAO's recommendations as soon as possible if confirmed?
Senator, if I'm confirmed, whistleblowers and their rights and protections will be amongst my very highest priorities. It always has been, and it always will be. As you say, they're critical to our system. I'll also examine the results of the GAO report and make sure, if they're not implemented, that we're implementing any necessary measures to not only meet, but to exceed and ensure we're doing everything we can in that area.
Very well, thank you. Mr. Lohman, the recent tensions with Russia have certainly reminded our country how critical it is to ensure cybersecurity for critical infrastructure, especially energy-related infrastructure. If confirmed, your office will clearly play a significant role in reducing cyber risk to ensure that we can maintain reliable power for critical defense missions. So I would like you to tell the committee how you believe the Department of Defense should approach ensuring cybersecurity for Department of Defense energy systems.
Senator, let me first start by commending the members of this committee and the Congress for your interest in this area. A couple of years ago, the Congress passed Section 1647 and 1650, which required the department to develop a process to routinely assess vulnerabilities, not only in our weapon system platforms, but also in our installation control systems. So speaking from experience, in my last job as performing the duties of Undersecretary of the Army has taken this challenge on. And if confirmed, I will work very closely with the other services and my staff to ensure that the necessary resources, policy, and processes are in place such that the services can routinely scan their installation control systems, identify those vulnerabilities, and then rapidly address the vulnerabilities and mitigate them.
Very good. Mr. Lohman, the pandemic also demonstrated how vulnerable our supply chains are to global disruptions and the drawback to the fact that we've offshored too much of critical manufacturing and other sources of supplies. This was especially apparent at the beginning of the pandemic when we struggled to get PPE equipment in the hands of first responders all across the country and other frontline workers. So much of that production had moved to China. So my question to you is, if confirmed, how will your office work with the department and with private sector partners to shore up our supply chains that are absolutely critical to national defense, certainly things such as PPE, but also pharmaceuticals and other industrial supplies that are important not just for the Department of Defense, but for the civilian sector as well.
Senator, resilient supply chains, especially in the national defense arena, are critical to our ability to prosecute global operations. So if confirmed, I'll work with the interagency community to develop the policy necessary to promote domestic competition, but also work with our commercial partners and the services to build resiliency in our domestic commercial supply chains, as well as increase capacity. In some cases, this will necessitate onshoring capability back into the nation.
Good. Well, if confirmed, I look forward to working with you on that critical issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Peters. I would now like to recognize via WebEx Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate all of the participants today on your nominations. I'd also like to thank Mr. Lohman for our call last week. A combat credible logistics backbone is crucial to deterring our adversaries, and I appreciated our discussion on how to strengthen and mature this capability. I would like to start off with the balance between modernization and maintaining readiness rates of our current assets. Our military remains reliant on 1980s and in some places 1970s technology. A 2020 GAO report reviewed annual readiness rates for 46 different aircraft from 2011 to 2019, and only 3 of these aircraft hit their annual readiness goals for all 9 years, and 24 of them did not meet their goal in any of the years covered. This is types of aircraft, not individual aircraft. Yet we must also remain ready today to mobilize and respond to a global crisis, which we are seeing play out now with our need to transport thousands of troops to the European theater. While I understand that there's an art to balancing current mission readiness needs with modernization, I am concerned that the department does not have a strong glide slope and transition plan for key mobility and logistical assets in particular. Mr. Lohman, if confirmed, how will you work with the program offices, services, and combatant commands to build strong transition plans that roll out much needed modernized assets without divesting of legacy platforms so quickly that we create a near-term capacity gap that endangers mission accomplishment?
Senator, thank you for that question. So it's really a balance, as you rightly note, between modernization and sustainment, and the need to appropriately allocate the resources to sustain our current capabilities, especially in the inter and intra-theater lift, as you noted, but also to modernize those fleets in a sustainable fashion over time. The second balance, Senator, that you didn't mention, but I think is important to note here, is the balance across the active and reserve components to make sure that the resources the reserve components need to sustain their fleets and that they have the sufficient lift capability built into the COCOM logistics plans so that the department not only sustains the lift capability that they need, but also modernizes it over time.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought up the reserve forces. I hope that we're not going to be modernizing, for example, active duty Air Force at the expense of the Air National Guard in particular. I do want to move on to another issue, another source of our readiness issues. In that same 2020 GAO report, it was noted that in addition to aging aircraft, a noteworthy factor in our low readiness rates is lack of parts. I am interested in opportunities to collaborate with commercial industry to reduce the wait times and the cost of parts. One approach is to take advantage of used serviceable material from commercial derivative aircraft. Under this program, the FAA provides the Department of Defense certified overhauled parts from 737 and 767 aircraft at a reduced cost. Initial estimates put material savings over the next 7 years at around $1.5 billion. Not insignificant. This program also reduces supply chain lead times. The program already exists within the DoD, but it is not standardized across all programs and services. And I've seen reports where purchasing officers have a program F function on their keyboard, F7, where they just hit a function and it populates a form and they can buy brand new parts, but it is multi-steps to use this program that exists for used parts. Mr. Lohman, if confirmed, What will you do to require or incentivize program offices and services to take advantage of proven programs like used serviceable materials? And are there any barriers to this collaboration that Congress can work to remove to encourage its use?
Senator, so part of addressing supply chain risk and building resilience is identifying alternative sources of supply. And so the USM program, as you accurately note, is used by industry today. And in some components, I'm aware it's used within the Department of Defense. If confirmed, I'll work closely with the services and the ASDF staff to make sure there are no policy barriers to use of the USM. And I would work with the interagency community, in particular the FAA, to make sure that the necessary airworthiness documentation is available to guarantee the life of the part, the repair history, for example, the hours currently consumed by that particular part. So I look forward to taking this on.
Wonderful. I don't think the pacing item here is the lack of documentation on the serviceable life of the parts. I think it is resistance within DoD and program offices and the services to using the program and using these parts, because it's just easier to buy new every time. But I'm happy to work with you on this and look forward to it.
Thank you,
I have 2 additional questions I will submit for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. Now, via WebEx, I would like to recognize Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Chairman Reed, and of course, Ranking Member Inhofe for holding this hearing. And I want to thank all the nominees for your testimony today and really for your willingness to serve and all the service that you have given already to this country. And I want to talk a little bit today about affordable housing for service members. So Mr. Storch, last year's NDAA included one of my provisions to hold the Pentagon accountable for not yet utilizing existing authorities to support our most junior service members when transitioning off base to private housing. The provision requires the Secretary of Defense to brief Congress on DoD's plan to provide partial dislocation allowance payments to junior enlisted troops who are forced out of military-provided housing due to shortages, and they have to incur moving costs and the like before they're eligible to receive their basic allowance for housing, the BAH. So, Mr. Storch, if confirmed, can we count on you to hold the Pentagon accountable for developing and executing a plan to provide our most junior service members with the dislocation allowance they earn as they're authorized to do under existing law? I have heard this time and time again at Nellis and Creech as I do roundtables with young enlisted members, service members. This is one of the number one things that they're concerned about.
Thank you, Senator. I'm aware that housing is one of the top management challenges that was identified by the DoD and its DoD IG in its recent assessment of the top challenges. And if confirmed, I would work with the team at the OIG to assess the issues that you've identified and do all appropriate oversight to make sure that the agency is following the law and providing the housing that service members deserve.
Thank you. I sure appreciate that. I want to move on to something else I've been hearing about, which is maternal health for our service members and their families. So Dr. Martinez-Lopez, Dallas Air Force Base, of course, in Nevada, offers some of the most robust maternity care services compared to military installations across the nation. But because some installations can't provide that wide array of maternity services that we offer at Nellis, TRICARE enrollees often pursue such services through a community provider. So Dr. Martinez-Lopez, improvements can we make to maternity care services offered to TRICARE enrollees, and how would you approach that if confirmed? And do you believe that you have the existing authorities to allow the department to make such improvements?
Senator, the health of all service members and family members entrusted to us is the reason of the military health care system. Said that, maternal health for both service members and family members has to be of the most importance. And we have to make sure that the quality of the care and the quality of the service, how do we deliver that, is right on target. So if I'm confirmed, I I commit to work with my team and look at ways that we can bring parity, so in such a way that service members and family members can rest assured that they will get the best care either inside the medical treatment facility or outside in the TRICARE, service area.
So if confirmed, would you consider conducting a DoD-wide satisfaction survey for service members who have either recently or are currently receiving maternity care through TRICARE? That might help guide us into some of the things that we have to do. Will you commit to working on that with me, please?
Senator, getting feedback from the people we serve, that's critical. So if I'm confirmed, I'll work with you, and not only to get feedback regarding maternal health care, but we need to get feedback regarding all health care we deliver inside and outside. So yes, ma'am.
And I'm just going to build on that a little bit because with military retirees, because we want to be sure they have full and equal access to the health care that they have, they've really earned over the course of their service. There's about 30,000 military retirees in my state. Unfortunately, our retirees, they just face anxiety of the potential rollback of these health services available to them. And right now, the Defense Health Agencies, their current plan is to right-size the military health system, moving 200,000 TRICARE beneficiaries to private medical networks, closing much of the Department of Defense military treatment facilities. So what steps will you take to be sure that our military retirees have the full access to the quality health care that they deserve and have earned?
Senator, I'm one of those retirees. So, first and foremost, the important thing is that we keep readiness. So that's the reason why we have a military health system. Said that, we also have to honor what we told the service members, family members, and retirees that we were going to do, care for them. So as we finish transformation, which is it is one of my priorities, finish the intent of the Congress and the execution of the military health system transformation, I will never lose sight of the fact that we need to honor that. So as we transfer care to the civilian, to the TRICARE network, I personally need to make sure that those retirees and service members and family members are cared for. And if not, how can we close that gap? We cannot disengage just to disengage. We owe them better, and if I'm confirmed, I'll work really hard to honor that commitment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. My time's expired. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing, and thank you, all of you, for being here today. I want to follow up on Senator Duckworth's questioning about parts, but specifically with a connection to Arizona. Mr. Lohman, the 309th Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Group, AMARG, located at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, is a major component of our organic industrial base, commonly referred to as the boneyard. The 309th provides not just storage and preservation, but aerospace depot maintenance and modifications, as well as aircraft regeneration. It also provides some spare parts for the fleet. A few years ago, the 309th was able to regenerate a B-52 that has been in the boneyard for nearly 10 years and return it to service after the Air Force lost one of its bombers, a truly remarkable fleet. In the 90s, I dropped off a A-6 Intruder at the boneyard, but that's been now 25, maybe over 25 years ago. I'm not so sure that one's coming back. But the 309th is also able to salvage parts to contribute to important research and innovation work within our military, including modernizing the B-52 fleet and as a supply of parts when we can't find one. This capability that
it's a capability that we have to continue and needs to be preserved. So if confirmed, how will you work with this committee to ensure that our nation's organic industrial base is properly resourced?
Thank you, Senator. Senator, you rightly note that the organic industrial base is a critical component of the overall defense industrial base in this nation. And AMARG is a great example of a capability resident within that organic industrial base to not only regenerate capability, but also to provide long-term storage, repair capability, and in some cases, parts reclamation. I can tell you in the late 80s, as a young Marine stationed at Yuma, I spent a little bit of time up at Davis Monthan recovering parts for an A4 Skyhawk, also long out of service. So, Senator, if confirmed, I'll work with the services, I'll work with my staff and this committee to make sure that the organic industrial base capabilities resident within all the services are modernized and capable of continuing sustainment of our fleets as we modernize those fleets. That includes training personnel, that includes new plant and equipment to sustain these new capabilities such as directed energy, hypersonics, fifth-generation fighters, onward and so forth. So this is a priority for me.
Thank you, Mr. Lohman. I look forward to working with you and your team. Dr. Martinez, last year I introduced bipartisan legislation aimed at bringing TRICARE plans in line with private insurance plans. The Healthcare Fairness for Military Families Act would allow the children of service members to stay on their parents' health insurance, TRICARE, until they're 26 years old. I remain very concerned about the fact that military families don't have the same health care coverage that other Americans enjoy, and the disparity is even more troubling as we continue to battle this pandemic and its detrimental impact on health and employment. I believe this common sense proposal will help countless military families as we come out of this pandemic, and it'll help our economy recover, which is why I push for it to be included in the NDAA. What are your thoughts on expanding TRICARE coverage to military dependents until the age of 26?
Senator, I think, the health care of our servicemen and family members is critical. So if I get confirmed, I'm going to be looking at ways to bring parity, healthcare parity. So we should be offering, insurance coverage just like the rest of America is seeing. So I commit to work with my team to try to close the gap and maybe have to come back and get some help. But you get my commitment that I'll strive for that healthcare parity.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. It just seems like also as just a fundamental question of fairness, dependents of members of the military get the same treatment as folks in the civilian world. So thank you, and I have another question for you I'm going to submit for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony today.